Recent events have more people in the United States and other countries on edge about terrorism. What's more difficult is finding agreement on how to respond, especially when terrorism overlaps with the refugee crisis in Syria. One kind of response was favored last night in the vigil held on Boston Common. Our guest is one of the organizers. He's from the program staff with the American Friends Service Committee. We'd like to welcome Paul Shannon. Thank you very much for being with us, Paul.
Nice to see you, Chris.
A lot of those signs out there made it clear last night is that this was maybe more noticeably than anything else sort of a reaction to what we're getting from Donald Trump, that the way to deal with this is to keep out a certain group of people trying to come into this country.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's statements sure have gotten a lot of publicity and have caused a real uproar and from a lot of different angles. The idea of keeping out Syrian refugees as having something to do with preventing terrorism is just such a bad road to go down. These refugees are people who are fleeing for their lives. They're people that are suffering from a lot of what outside countries have done to the Middle East, especially us, not just us by any means, but the fact that we helped create ISIS by destroying the Iraqi government and causing all this uproar in the area. People forget, it's kind of like every crisis there is, it's kind of like everything starts yesterday. And the idea that there's history to any of these things and that the events relate to each other is just lost. And so that's a real tragedy. But back during the Iraq War, we were told by the CIA, hey, this war, our policy is breeding jihadists all over the place. The Iraq War is the main cause for young people getting involved in these things. And those people today are ISIS. And ISIS is an incredibly extremist, violent group. But these things don't just fall out of the sky. When people in an area have had every other option in terms of having a decent life removed from them, from the combination of outside interference, the combination of corrupt and dictatorial governments supported by outside forces, these people are caught in the middle of these huge forces that are operating on them. And the fact that now we're saying we're not going to allow them into the country, I mean, this is a scandal. This is a scandal. It harkens back really to our refusal to take Jewish refugees from Germany, during World War II. It's a tragedy.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to object and say, well, the Jewish refugees never did any harm to anybody, and here we are talking about, I know in a small minority, but we are talking about a group in which some individuals have done some things that are very harmful.
Well, none of them are Syrians, thank goodness.
Well, so far, yes. In fact, they're citizens of France or Belgium or the United States.
We could have said during World War II, we could have said the Nazis might have infiltrated some people in with any Jewish refugees. Yeah. I mean, you use common sense in this situation, but the reality is quite clear. These people are trying to get away. They're trying to find safety for themselves and their families. They're doing the same thing we would do under similar circumstances. And to shut them out, just carte blanche like that is just a tragedy. It's not something that reflects, at least I hope, what we are. And so anyway, that's one piece of the problem, the Syrian refugees. The other concern, of course, is how these crises are going to impact Muslims in the United States.
What do you see happening?
Well, Trump's statements, as well as statements of other leaders, is concerning because it does resonate with a certain part of the population that these people have to be, you have to control them in some way. And of course, most of the Muslims in this country are horrified by what ISIS is all about.
Well, what you see going on here, ISIS is polarizing several countries. Trump, I guess, is polarizing Americans or people in America. What do you think should be done about that?
Well, the first thing to realize is the United States is not a Middle Eastern country. it does not have the answers. At best, it can start to undo some of the the reasons it's given for these developments of extremism. The first thing is that ISIS loves it when the United States goes to war against them. I mean, they use this as propaganda to get more people in. See, the Crusaders are coming after us again, and you need us to protect you. That whole dimension, Americans are not willing to face up to. And that's a very, very serious thing. So I think in terms of a new policy, there are a number of different areas. The first is to be careful, but to allow, as Canada is doing today, allow thousands of these desperate people safe haven in the United States while their country is being obliterated. So that's number one. The second is to back up a little bit and look at the source of this. It would be one thing if we were fighting this war in Iraq and Syria now out of concern for what ISIS is doing to people there. There's just nothing that indicates in the classified record of our foreign policy that that's why we're there. We're there for our own strategic purposes. We want to make sure that our boys stay in power, whether they're in Saudi Arabia or some particular guerrilla force that we have close relations with, in order to accomplish our real strategic goal. You know, all this stuff goes in. It's very easy. When we look at Russia being there, who says, we're there to fight ISIS, we say, oh, right. Sure, that's why you're there.
They have an agenda, the church has it. But certainly what we are hearing from a lot of the leaders in this country, not just Republicans, is that we are over there because whatever makes ISIS stronger, including the money from extracting oil, poses a threat here. And we have had threats at least inspired by them here.
By ISIS?
Yes.
I'm scared. I'm scared of ISIS. Anyone should be. This is a very dangerous organization, but we shouldn't help them, therefore. We shouldn't give them an ability to recruit more people, presenting themselves as the great liberators of foreign oppression in the area. That's just not what we should do. ISIS looks around and can point to people, hey, you guys are supporting, who did you support against, you supported Saddam Hussein at one point? Hey, you supported this group here at this point. It presents us as the foreigners, which we are, there for our own purposes. They look at what kind of life this has led for them in Syria and Iraq over these years. They look at the government we created in Iraq, which started persecuting the Sunni majority in the country, and minority in the country, cracking down on them. These are things that led people to gravitate toward ISIS to protect them from our boys. And we have to come to terms with that. We have to back off and create a new framework. We have to stop the bombing. War is simply not the answer. There's a big discussion now about how much war, boots on the ground, and all this type of stuff. What we're seeing, more troops are going today. More helicopters are going today. They're going to be fighting with an Iraqi government that many people absolutely hate. We have to look at these things, back off, try to get ourselves and the other outside powers there to give up our own strategic objectives, to cut off weapons going into the area, to stop funding various militias. All of those weapons eventually end up with ISIS anyway. To stop, we have flooded that area with very sophisticated weapons, and a lot of them get to ISIS. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia takes those weapons and has killed thousands of people in another country called Yemen that no one could even care about. How about those civilians being wiped out by us and our ally? There's no proportionality, there's no perspective on it that is shared in the country. And that's the first step, to understand the whole framework for what's going on. And to see that the first step is to not do any more harm than has already been done, and to work for getting countries together to really allow a negotiated settlement that turns the process over to Syrians. One thing that I just want to mention before I go on. We saw in the Arab Spring back in 2011 that in Syria and in all these other countries, there are millions of people who want a decent life, who want democracy, who want some freedom from these tyrants like Assad in Syria, this group that we call the government of Iraq. We saw that spirit come up among all these people. But all this outside stuff, it just gets in the way of those forces emerging. These are nonviolent forces who are just totally pushed off to the sideline as long as the whole country, the whole area is militarized. So the idea is let's get the weapons out of there. Let's stop all this foreign military stuff going in that always ends up in the wrong places. And let's see what we can do to pull back and allow a situation in which Syrians can express what they want and take care of their own situation.
Thank you very much for being with us, Paul Shannon.
Chris.
In a moment, we'll talk about a call for stronger response to climate change.